we are willing to use the word soul about the workplace, but how we design workplaces is so far away from creating that something that you'd actually call soulful.
Hi, I'm Dieter Wood, Managing Director of Interaction, and this is Thrivalism, our podcast focused on the art of thriving, flourishing and evolving under any conditions. In this series, we'll examine how to create flourishing businesses, cultures, careers and places. We'll explore key topics such as workplace design and build, culture and community, sustainability and of course, the future of work. Join us and our guests as we explore how people and businesses can set themselves up not just to survive, but thrive. In this episode, our head of marketing, Toby, catches up with Sanderson Jones, comedian, coach and co-founder of global secular community, the Sunday Assembly. When he's not officiating mass weddings and helping companies with their culture, he's taking inspiration from the way religious organisations foster community and examining ways he can bring more what he calls lifefulness to work. In this episode, Sanderson explores the ideas of covenants, congregations and commitment and discusses how he's been making megachurches jealous. This is a wonderful conversation, but with some strong language. But I hope you enjoy it.
Sanderson, welcome to Thrivalism. Let's start at the beginning then, I guess. So the Sunday Assembly, if you could give us a bit of background on how that came to be and how the Lifefullness project evolved from it, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if people know that we met when you were doing comedy and I was doing comedy as well.
Nobody will know that.
No, many moons ago. Yeah. And so that's what I was. I was a professional stand-up comedian but I had this idea, is it possible to do something which is a bit like church, but which everyone could come to? So instead of hymns, pop songs, instead of a sermon, a TED-style talk, instead of prayer, mindfulness. And so that's what, I didn't have it fully worked out when I first thought of it as I was in a Christmas carol service, but I just like, why can't you do this, which just celebrates life? So then in 2013 with Pippa Evans, another amazing comic, that would imply that I'm an amazing comic, another inspiring, amazing, super sexy comic. Then we decided to do it. And so we launched it as a little experiment in North London. And then it turned out that it really struck a chord, that there were loads of people who wanted that sense of community, that sense of purpose, and that sense of belonging. And so what was weird is that I suddenly ended up changing job. I went from being a comic and on the first day of doing Sunday Assembly, because 200 people turned up to the first one. We were over full by the second, went to 2 services a day by the third. It went bonkers. But on that first day, I was like, this has got all the things that I love about my job as a stand-up, but it really goes and makes a difference in people's lives.
You don't have to sit and write any jokes, so that's a win.
Oh, well, the show, it's actually a bit of a nightmare because from the point of view of stand-up, you can do something and then if it doesn't work, then you just don't do it ever again. And then you just get your 20 minutes better and better and better. But when doing congregation, you go and write something and then it's done. You've burnt it. So it's in fact an absolute writing sort of conundrum and inferno of words.
So it was immediately successful, obviously resonated with lots of people to get your capacity for that first one. What are some of the things that you think really resonated with people and what drove people to respond to it in such numbers?
I think there's just this drive for community, this need for real connection. And it's not, just any old connection. It's not like, oh, you've connected on Facebook. I've never hit the second syllable so hard. Facebook. So when you meet South Africans, they go CDs. So on Facebook. And it's not that sort of it's genuine connection. And there's something about the congregational structure which says you can bring whatever here. That you can bring the big questions. You can bring the fact that you're stressed at work. And people will be accepting. There's clearly just such a huge need for that, which we're doing our best to address. But in the past almost 10 years since we started, it hasn't got better and we're just more and more aware of the problem.
And how, obviously, you can't just bring people together and expect community and connections to happen. So what are some of the things you've done that facilitate that.
Yeah, and maybe this is a good way to go and sort of relate it to work, because I know that's what your audience are going to be interested in. Yeah, they hate community. That's them. They only care about this stuff that is related to work, I've heard. A bunch of mercenary psychopaths. That's how I judge them all. So if you go and think about what happens in a congregation, there are so many different processes, different activities which go on in order to make it work. And so then the question is like, okay, how can those then go and be things that we can be learned in the workplace? Because often we found when doing Sunday assembly is that people would be like, oh, there'd be people like, oh no, we can't get together to sing songs together. That's religious. And you just think,
right?
No, it's not. Because people love singing songs. People love hearing something inspiring. They mean, oh no, it'd be fine if you've got contemplation. It's fine if you've got an inspiring talk. It's fine if you've got songs. But the moment they're together, that should be something only for religions. And there is, just that thing of like, how do you do your gatherings? I think that was the thing which really set us apart. And in fact, I was having a conversation with a vicar today who happened to have gone to a Sunday assembly and a church called Holy Trinity Brompton on the same day. Holy Trinity Brompton are, in the church world, the big daddies.
The alphas.
That's literally where the alpha course comes from. Yeah. So there, you were spot on there. He was like, and I preferred Sunday assembly. I was like, yes! That's the congregationalist.
1-0 against God. Brilliant.
Yeah. I don't see it in those terms. So yeah, think about what is different about a church gathering, a congregation, to, most conferences, to most work events. You bring your whole body into it. You can, people sing a song. Like, why shouldn't that happen? And not in some ridiculous. It might happen at the end of a Christmas party when everyone's had a few drinks and something comes on, everyone's singing, or but it's actually really fun to do it. Like, it doesn't have to be weird.
When you go in, doesn't have to be weird, but when you go into workplaces, for instance, and obviously people go to church with the idea they're going to sing a song. And that's quite reductionist. That's obviously not all that happens in the church. But they go in with the idea of knowing what's going to happen and being game for that. If you go into a workplace and you've got 30 people from accounts who have never sung together in their lives, how do you, not that singing is the only thing you do, but how do you begin to break down those barriers and get people to feel more comfortable indulging in those sort of rituals?
It is. You do have to work hard to make that work. And it's something which, as a performer and as an organizer of shows, I realized how much inbuilt knowledge there was from literally, how do you lay out the seats?
Yeah.
If you let everyone be spread out, and you're never going to have that atmosphere. Yeah. People will say, I want to sit at the back. And you've got to, as with the comedy show, you've got to say, no, you don't want to sit at the back. You want to be at the front, and you want there to be people at the front. And so you want to get the room laid out right. If you're going to do it, then go and make sure the music's loud. You don't want people to be able to hear their own voices a thing. No. You make sure that it is at a time when it does seem okay. Like, let's say you were able, there'll always be some people in an office, the sort of people who would be jumping up and leading karaoke who would like this, and to say, okay, every Friday before we leave, or, at an offsite, I think that's particularly a sort of good way of doing it. And then just going for it, because once people get going, then it's as though something's been unlocked.
Yeah.
Because you've been in a crowd when they, sing Living on a Prayer, and then it suddenly drops down. We're halfway there. Turn off the music. Whoa, living on it. And suddenly what's happened? You've changed emotions. You feel connected. You feel picked up. You get all of those sort of neurochemicals rushing through you, the dopamine, the endorphins, which help you feel connected to others. And I guess the thing which I'd push back is, why does it feel so odd to do that in a workplace? Why does it feel so weird that would happen? We're this thing that I often harp on about when I'll start talking about I'm on a mission to bring soul into the workplace.
Yeah.
People are like, oh no, soul, you can't soul them. That's not that. And, souls doesn't have anything to do with jobs. Soul doesn't really have anything to do with work. It's got nothing to do with the office. And then you ask those same people, what's the most soulless job you've ever had? And everyone knows it instantly.
Yeah.
It turns out like we are willing to use the word soul about the workplace, but how we design workplaces is so far away from creating that something that you'd actually call soulful. And yeah, so that's just one thing of like thinking about how do you gather people in events? How can you do it in a way which creates more emotion and engagement?
And thinking about being soulful at work, does that link into mission and purpose and those sort of principles? Or can you have a company that is purely like, we just sell plastic goods, but be a soulful environment to be in? How does that balance out?
Well, I think that, you can sell plastic goods in a soulful way and you can sell plastic goods in a soulless way. There are monks whose job it is to dig up gardens in their monastery, and they do that because it is part of God's work, and they tend every single leaf as though it is sacred, and they're part of this huge chain of being.
Yeah, but they might be secretly hating it.
They
would never tell you. They would never tell you.
That's maybe all monks are lying. Research question. But then you could, to use a more prosaic example, there will be a company which is selling plastic goods, and there'll be someone delivering it who thinks, oh my God, this job is the worst. How on earth do they end up delivering plastic goods? There'll be someone else who's the boss thinks, when I do this, look, people need these. I'm doing it in the most environmentally conscious way as possible. I'm providing a real service. I really want to create a place for my staff where they can grow and they can flourish. We treat each other with respect. That's a huge value. We love our customers and go above and beyond them. We are providing a service when we do this. And that same person who's delivering those plastic goods will have the opportunity to be like, oh no, actually, that's great. Every single day I'm coming along. I'm sold into that. I met a woman in Australia, in Port Douglas, and she was selling ice creams. And I said, how's your day? She went, oh, mate, I've got the best job in the world here in Port Douglas. I sell ice creams to people on holiday. Everyone loves ice creams. Everyone loves holidays. And you're just like, what a way of looking at that job, right?
So that sort of ties into some other stuff, because obviously there's a big role for leadership, I think, in creating that environment. And I'd imagine during the pandemic, and with people now refocused on maybe more meaningful work, or, the great resignation with people quitting jobs that aren't important to them, what are some of the new or maybe ignored softer skills that leadership need to have in order to create those environments? Are there any they can nick directly from religious communities and institutions?
Yeah, I think that is really a great place to go looking. If you go and think about those people who complain about what millennials want from work, or Gen Z, oh, they want a place which is meaningful work, where people respect them, where they're listened to. Who are these people? I can't believe it. Yes, that's what I wanted throughout my career, but I never had the courage to ask.
But I'm not bitter about it.
Yeah. So what people are expecting from work, literally in that same person. Rah! What do they think this is? A bloody church? What do they think this is? It's like, actually, that's what people want. They want a place where they are able to flourish, where they're able to grow, where they have got really good relationships with the people next to them, where that same organization is taking a stand on social justice issues. As where I often put it, is that the leader of the future is going to need to have a lot more in common with a vicar, a priest, or an imam than they will an engineer or a general. It is those things where people come together because everyone's realizing the work they want to do, that it's got to be significant to them.
So what are some of those qualities of a priest, a vicar, or imam that bring people together?
Having the skills to create an environment where you can create relationships.
Right.
And so that means that everyone needs to understand why relationships are important. You need to have a congregation, it was often called a covenant, but, there'd be behavioral guidelines. But I think behavioral guidelines actually loses something. That's like, don't do this, don't do this. When in fact, it's like, this is how we choose to act together. And it comes from our values. Relationships are important. We're going to act a certain way. So, again, that's a super interesting place to go and look at this idea of covenants. What's yours? There's also something in community, which is called a real danger in community is triangulation. So what happens is that Dave has got a problem with Samantha. And so Dave goes and speaks to Paul about the problem with Samantha. And so now instead of there just being two people involved, there's a triangle.
Yeah.
And
Paul's got to take a side.
Yeah. And then suddenly, and it's like, well, don't bring this to me. Actually, as a leader, as much as possible to be able to say, why are you speaking to me about that? Go and speak to them. And if someone can't speak to them, or if someone thinks that it's not safe to speak to them, then again, you've got to go and look at what is happening in the organization. And so that's, again, this idea of triangulation of how can you go and make sure that everyone knows that the best way of dealing with something is to bring it to that person. As part of that, the other person also has to know that it's not them being blamed. They have to know that someone can have a disagreement with you, and it can be as much about, different ways of doing things as right or wrong.
It's not an indictment.
It's not an indictment. And you know what? Even if it is something that you reflect on that you did wrong, you might not have been aware of it. So, it's a minister I really like called Andy Pecula who calls them, I think it's Yarfogs. It's like yet another fucking opportunity for growth. So there's that thing of like, not only do people have to have the tools and permission to go and speak to someone else and for someone to know that that's okay, they then need to have the sort of internal resources to be able to take that on board. And I guess it's just being aware of like, okay, what are some of the other things which are at my disposal in order to go and, again, on this thing, create community and relationships. And one of the things which is most powerful is small groups. And they're groups that are small.
Okay.
That probably answers
Crazy concept.
Yeah, crazy concept. And so like these big, I'm sure you've seen pictures of these literally called megachurches, these huge churches. You've got 2,000 people, 1010,000 people, whatever it is.
The ones that
amount.
refuse to shut during COVID and just spread it like
there
wildfire.
are also some that have got very bad ideas. I always end up being the atheist who is most pro-church of anyone in a room.
Yeah, apologetic.
And there are, I'll be clear, there are some things it's totally impossible to apologize for. Though a friend of mine, the philosopher Jules Evans, he once said, Sanderson, I sometimes think that there's going to be an ISIS video and you're going to be in the background. And afterwards you'll say, you know what? There's actually a lot that you can learn from them if you look past the things that you disagree with.
They're all really engaged. They're all very motivated.
They're very engaged. They will do anything. So... By the way, no one starts listening to podcasts halfway through, so that is not at all my message.
We'll definitely edit that bit into an audio clip that we used to promote
Very
it.
good.
So yeah, absolutely fine.
So one of these tools is small groups, and so you've got these massive things, and there's this great line which is used from a guy called Rick Warren, which is the bigger you get, the smaller you've got to get. So if you go to there's a classic thing in startups, that thing, there were 60, we all knew each other. Now we're 120, now we're 200.
Yeah.
If you want to go and maintain that level of connection and intimacy, like having a group which might meet once every 2 weeks to once a week, it depends how you do it, to go and really say what is going on, like to be able to be open and say, this is what's happening in my life. You can give it a work context, like, one of the reasons I've been finding it difficult is this.
So not necessarily groups that have got a particular work function, but groups whose sole purpose is to be a group, essentially.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you can actually have them around a work function or around a task that, let's say, people want to get better with. And so I was speaking to some people about doing one in their company for people who wanted to post more on LinkedIn.
Right.
Yeah. And that sounds totally daft and a real manipulation of these sacred practices. But what are some of
LinkedIn? Yeah.
Of LinkedIn, yeah. Do not debase LinkedIn by connecting it with the transcendent. LinkedIn rules over everything. But a lot of the reasons why people don't do that is because they might have imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You know, you might feel worried that other people are going to judge you. It's a skill you haven't developed. And again, that's embarrassing. So like what happens is what we were discussing was what happens if there's a group of people who can get together once every 2 weeks and they've got, you know, the first half is like saying, this is what I've been trying to do. This is why I find it hard. You know, how can you find that place where you can go and connect and that place where you can be yourself? Because you can be totally surrounded by people, but if folk don't know who you are, you can still feel alone. And that is what is the case in so many offices. And people
don't feel they have a safety net often where they can admit vulnerability or weakness or...
Yeah. And so you've got to make sure that the guidelines on how you do that are really safe, right? In order for that to happen, people are like, oh, someone might report, so it's got to be, you know, that's why like the leader's got to take responsibility.
Yeah.
People know that this is how we do things here. And so then having a place where people can go and check in with what they're doing. Maybe they've got this task, which is we all want to post on LinkedIn more. And, you know, and you also say, you know, on Wednesday, we're all going to go and like each other's posts or whatever it might be. You can make it related to that. And then say, okay, now we're going to go and what's the action that I'm going to take? And so having that group of people that you see and you know it is something which is just in your diary and you're going to commit to it will end up really growing in time. And if everyone is engaged with that, there will be 6, 7, 8 people in your company. You can go and switch them up every 6 months. You can do this thing where you go and, okay, half the group are going to mix with someone else. So you start to meet other people and you create these really deep, powerful relationships. And by, you know, if you can make sure that it's like an opportunity for people to reflect on their culture, you know, what does this say about who we are? Why is this important? Then suddenly, like, and for, what is it? 1 hour every 2 weeks? And people are always like, I don't have time. You're like, if you do not have 1 hour every 2 weeks.
If you stop posting on LinkedIn so much.
Yeah. But if you don't have that 1 hour every 2 weeks for your culture, then how on earth is it ever going to be, like, is it ever going to feel how you want it to feel?
Be a real thing, yeah. And I guess if you do that, you create lots of mini cogs in your business that will driving different things forwards, which leads to a further momentum.
Yeah, like, and you can do that, let's say, after an away, like a big focus of my work is away days and offsites because they are, so at Sunday Assembly, we essentially just created events, sometimes longer ones, which were about people's purpose and community and creating community, brought ideas to life, different ideas every time. But then after that, it's like, okay, how can we maintain this? You know, that feeling like you come back for an offsite and you're like, that was great. And then it's Tuesday and you're like,
I've done a lot of offsites and many of them have been very good, but it's the ones that are disaster that really stick with people. And I think the minute you mention the word offsite, everybody sort of cringes a bit internally. So what are the mistakes you see? What does best practice look like? Things have obviously changed again now because we might be seeing each other face to face less. What do people need to know? So
in the world of offsites, which even though you say we're going to be seeing each other less in the work, that actually makes offsites more important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Companies like GitLab and Buffer, and I could just start inventing companies which come from Silicon Valley, and Smasher and Kiri and
Grey Dog.
Yeah, I'm seeing words which are on my screen now. But Buffer and Automatic, they will have all hands company offsite once every quarter because they're totally remote. And so they think that unless you've got these moments when you can create that emotional connection, then you're not able to collaborate because after a while you lose that sort of known embodied link with someone. And by embodied, I just realized that it's sort of just a daft word. It's like that physical thing of being with someone. It's why salespeople...
In a body.
In a body, yeah. But it's, the body thing. And so that's why they're so important. And I guess I heard it's amazing when you do still hear of the absolutely awful 1970s style, like trust exercise. What was your awful offsite then?
I worked for an agency who will remain nameless, and at the peak of summer, on a beautiful, clear summer's day, they put probably 50 of us on a coach to Centre Parks for the day. So it was probably a 2-hour journey. We got there, obviously sprawling forests, beautiful blue sky, loads of outdoor activities, and they went, come into this reception hall, closed, dark, get in this room, here's some notepaper, just have some ideas. Here's a few facilitators, just have a few ideas. And they locked us in a dark room for about 8 hours straight. And I sort of refused to have that and escaped and went looking for rabbits in the woods, and eventually bumped into the organisers who had also escaped. And we all had a really awkward chat outside going, what are you doing out here? Just fresh air. And it was the biggest waste of petrol, brain power, money, energy that I think I've ever been part of.
Yeah, that is just so dumb. Like, what is it? What part of Offsite didn't you understand? You were trying to get away somewhere, and part of that is to change the sort of visual input so you can try to get into a different space, again, embodied, like how we react to the spaces around us goes and creates the way we think. And then also, like, way too directed on work. There are now tools which will enable you to go and have lots of these discussions that maybe you needed to go and have people together with. And so that's not to say that there should be no planning or absolutely no business. The people who've been doing it the longest in the remote workspace generally have none.
Yeah.
And they say, look, this sort of offsite, which is about creating culture and creating connection, why go and mess it up by deciding what our OKRs are or whatever else that might be?
So when you run an offsite, what are the key things that are important for you to get right in that process?
It is to really go and know what the organizer wants. And that sounds obvious, but it's amazing, people will be like, oh, we're just going to go somewhere, we're just going to have a nice time, or we're going to go somewhere and I don't know, something will happen. But it's by knowing what you want that you then can go and look at all the tools that you've got in order to create an event and say, okay, we're going to use this here, we're going to use that there, we're going to have this opening ritual, we're going to have this closing one, whatever it might be. So that's the sort of first thing that I do.
Can you give us a quick insight into what some of those tools and rituals might be, some examples of those?
There was one which I have used, which is where you ask people to bring some earth from where they are. And so you can go, everyone can go and bring earth from there. And then it goes and puts in a pot. And then you go like have a flower in an office or a plant in an office, which grows from, which sort of like goes and grows there. And it's like a representation of what it is that you're doing. Like all of these are activities and metaphors which can be used for the values that you're bringing along.
Sure.
If you know what I mean. So, that could be that you want it to be about nature. It could be that you want it to be about growth. You could be that you want it to be about roots, whatever that might be.
And then 2 months later, as that plant is sadly dying in the core of an office, you just discreetly have it removed because no one's looked after it.
Yeah, it turns out someone's got real toxic earth where they're coming from. And the real example is one person can destroy everything we're working on. So then there's some thinking about what is the opening ritual? Like, is there something that you can say, we are going to, and you can do it in a really fun way. It doesn't you have a ritual. It makes it sound as though it's going to involve a lot of lentils and maybe a dream catcher.
Yeah.
But you can go and draw a line and just say, like the whole purpose of this is connection. And when we go and cross this, we're going to say, what is it? How do we want to connect? Like what brings us closer? And so it's like, oh yeah. And then it's like this symbolic start of going into a new space.
Yeah. Changing people's headspace as they get into that new area. And
yeah. And then there's the world before, because that's what you want. There's like the world before we cross this. And then there's a world after we cross this.
Yeah.
And it just goes and like brings that to mind symbolically. And it's really about symbolism. And then likewise, a closing ceremony to think about, okay, how do we want to go and, what is it that you take away? Like the simple act of having everyone in a circle it depends how big an organization you've got, and saying, what it is that you're taking from it. After you spend 2 days together, that's going to be really powerful. Like whether you like it or not, like once you start, because you've got to know people, you've got to connect to people. And so I guess this one, and and other things that you can do when you close out, there is the sort of, just come up with and these aren't, some of these exercises, I don't know where they come from. So just in the ether, the gratitude plate exercise where you go and everyone has a paper plate on their back, and everyone on the team make sure they write on everyone else in the team's plate. And then you look back at it and you're like, the nice things.
Hopefully.
Yeah. About like things that they're grateful for that person, whatever else it might be. And then at the end, everyone's got this like this moment to feel special, and they go and hear from other people what they think. So, there's one at the end, which is good, like a feedback bazaar, where you like almost like a bazaar where you go from one person to the other and you give them feedback of what it is that you really admire about them and a way that you can think they could become even better. So that's like saying like a compliment, which might push them forward. An interesting way to do that is to have people give feedback only to folk they don't really know.
Right. Okay.
Because
that sounds like it could go really wrong.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it ends up being really revealing and surprisingly profound. And to come to think of it, I actually think I pretty much got it from going to churches and just understanding what prayer was a bit more.
Right.
And
what's the connection there?
Well, because at the end of a church service, someone will come up to you and put their hands on your shoulders and go, look you straight in the eye and go, I can see you've got a lot of energy and a lot of joy. But I also see that there's a bit of reticence there. And if you just look someone in the face and just say, I'm just going to see you as you are, like you can pick up so much. And so that, and particularly in a remote setting where we know how much is lost when we're online, then doing that with making sure that everyone knows that it is fun and positive and all of that. I emphasize that the whole time. No one ever does feedback. You can lose weight. It's not at all what will happen. But that's, you can actually, it becomes quite intimate if it's someone you don't know very well, because you are just looking at someone and going, and you just really tune in with them. So those are, again, it's a part where when I talk about what I do in Offsites, it can seem a bit vague because it is just about finding the right tools for the job.
Yeah.
And about saying
the brief and the culture.
What is it you want? How do you want to go and bring that to life? And so someone could have, there could be one thing that you can use to illustrate bravery, or you can use it to illustrate, I don't know, cowardice or whatever it might be. And I do have an interest in this last point, a pretty keen interest, is I think it really pays to get a professional involved.
Like who?
Like who could that be? Doesn't have to be me, but it is.
What do you think the barriers to people doing internally are? What makes that difficult?
I think that offsites are often already really expensive.
Yeah.
Right? Like they go, that's that's, but like it's not only, and that's, people only look at this money they spend. They never look at the salary of having like the entire company stop working.
Yeah.
So if you added on it,
cost.
If you add on everyone's day rates, like it is a fortune. And then at the same time, people are like, oh yeah, but we're not going to get someone to help make that run smoothly. It would be, I'm going to put it to you, like what would be, like when you were doing comedy and on the circuit, what would be the reasons that you'd say someone should have an MC for a comedy night?
It's fairly vital, isn't it?
It's fairly vital.
You can't have one without it, really. Although there is one venue where they do it over a tannoy, but...
Yeah. And what happens if there was no one who, or like, oh, well, I host it, I'll just get them on and off. You're like, mate, it's going to be worse. And what happens
it's going to be actively terrible.
And again, I'm just going to use an analogy, just going to snap, or like a wedding with a really bad vicar, right? Like, oh no, this could have been beautiful, but instead it really isn't. And so I guess what it is that actually that atmosphere that you want to create and the connections that you want to make and the ideas that you want to communicate are sophisticated. In order to bring them to life, you need to have the sort of skills of a performer. And particularly that's more and more important the bigger the company is. You've got to go and be able to hold different people's attention. You actually have to be able to go and get people to, do various things, to go and, there'll be skills and sort of lessons that you can go and, practices that you've got. And also the ideas that you're trying to convey are sophisticated. There's a CEO who was not hired to be an amazing facilitator. That's not their job. Like, unless you're running a facilitation company, in which case, well done to you. That's probably it. And so, like, having someone who can make sure that when people arrive, they know what it's about. The in between of like getting from one thing to another. Okay, I can go and make this very smooth, make it relate back to what this thing is about. I can go and, something didn't quite work. All right, we can improvise. We can improvise that. And so in order to do all of those things, it really, you can make an event just so much better. And I guess that is they look at the costs, and there is this idea that, God, why am I spending this much or that much? We're going to book the acts, we're going to do the thing, but it makes the event swing and like creates that
multiplies the outcome.
And and if you were to say, we can make this 50% more effective, right?
Yeah.
It seems like I could really, maybe that's what I should do. I can make this 100% more effective, and all I charge is 80% the price of everything else on this offsite, which is not how my pricing works.
Just maths. Just maths. We've touched on, obviously we've got to wrap up fairly soon, but I just wanted to raise one thing with you before we do. A lot of what we've talked about is face-to-face, person-to-person, in the flesh stuff. And I think a lot of people are really struggling with how to keep communities going and culture going within the workplace when they've moved to remote or hybrids, or people just aren't seeing each other as much. What are your thoughts on what that should look like?
Yeah, I have a sort of a big bias here because the tools that I use there's a whole raft of people who are online community, Slack experts and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I also don't think the future of human connection is Slack. Imagine if you said to your partner, "Oh God, it's getting a bit complicated in our relationship. Should we move to? I think I want to take this relationship to remote over Slack." That's not the future of romance. And I think small groups also work online. I think that is one thing which is really simple to do, which is to get people together to go and like learn how to help people speak about the stuff which matters. Because actually, like Zoom is, I'm having a great time in this conversation. I'm loving it. This is not my normal Zoom meeting, right? This is not, okay, I don't know if you're agreeing that this is a normal Zoom meeting or that you love it. I'm going to take it and say yes for both.
Take both.
Both. And so it's not inherently on Zoom that makes conversations dull, or draining, or seem like, oh my God, there's another one. It's actually the content. And so if you're talking about things that matter, and particularly if you say, guys, people are feeling really disconnected, so we're going to spend an hour every 2 weeks, and it's going to be about connection. That is, and go and get some support. There's some ground rules that whole places you can go and find guidance on that. And so that is one thing which is really easy. And then I guess there's another one is to ask people what they're already doing in their own lives, which helps them connect or helps them feel connected. And so
that's interesting.
This comes from Sunday Assembly and from the world of congregations. It's this idea of ministry where you'll become a part of your community, and then you really like flowers. So guess what? You do the flowers. You're great with kids. You get involved with Sunday school. You like to play music. You play for the band. And so what you do is you go and find, like, how can you use the skills within your team which are things that people like doing, and then say to them, okay, what could be something that you could do which could involve other people and using this skill?
And that loops back into your core thing of bringing your whole self to work, doesn't it? In lifefulness and being able to bring 100% of yourself to what you do.
Though, and now I'm going to go for hard handbrake a lot, is that like also, it is so hard to bring your 100% of yourself to work.
And does anybody really want 100% of anybody?
No, they don't
No.
want 100% of yourself to work. So everyone has got to be trained as a mental health aider. Everyone's got to be trained as in a therapist. Most people don't even bring 100% of themselves to themselves. So I'm all for bringing more of yourself to work and for creating environments where there can be increased authenticity and connection. And I've worked in places where that is done in an amazing way and it just feels different. But this is circling back to, as a leader, if you want that to happen, then you've got to be amazingly emotionally aware. You've got to put in systems which allow people to share, which allow people to do it safely. And it is definitely the direction of travel, but I think points to the importance of that when you're doing stuff which connects with people more at their deepest level, it's got huge rewards, but it also needs to be done in a way with huge care and safety.
That is a beautifully crafted conclusion, Sanderson. Couldn't have finished better. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an incredible chat. Where can people find more of you? Where would you like to direct people?
Yes. So if they go to @Sanderson Jones, they can find me in LinkedIn, Twitter, and the places like Offsites and away days for remote and hybrid teams. And also, if people are wondering, what should you do about Christmas? I have got some events around that as well. So yeah, get in touch.
Great stuff. Perfect. Final question. What is the exact percentage of yourself you should bring to work?
Ooh, I would have to say 69.
See, of course you would. Yeah. I was thinking high 30s, but...
Okay. But you're not as mature as me.
No, never will be. Right. It's been lovely to have you on, Sanderson. Take care. People know where to find you. See you on the LinkedIn.
All right then. See you later. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.